Bueno, seguimos con el tour francés, con la presentación ahora de Romy Wyche. Romy Wyche obtuvo un máster y un doctorado en arqueología en la Universidad de Oxford, en arqueología clásica. Su investigación se centra en los sarcófagos romanos del sur de Francia. Ha pasado 7 años como investigadora y profesora en la Universidad de Oslo y ha trabajado en numerosas instituciones culturales, entre ellas el Bode de Berlín, en Alemania, el Museo de Arqueología de Lisboa, en Portugal, y la UNESCO de París, en Francia. Actualmente es directora del Musée départemental Arles Antique. Pasamos a otro lugar en Francia y otro formato de museo.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you so much, Isabel, for inviting us and sharing all our museums today. Thank you, Mercedes, also for doing all the back office. We're very happy to be here and to present to you the Musée de l'Art Antique. And it's especially interesting to present it after Rosemarie's presentation, because we're two obviously French museums, but we're so different in scope. For one thing, we are not a national museum, we are a departemental museum. So a department, in the strictest sense, it's an administrative division. But really, it's about a territory. Our territory, the Bouches-du-Rhône, comprise Marseille, Aix-en-Provence, and Arles. A very diverse and with a strong cultural identity. The objects in Arles are about, the museum in Arles collects objects that are from Arles and its region, but mostly from Arles, and it focuses on pre-Roman times to late antiquity. So we're really focused on something extremely specific, which is obviously very different from the man. But it's very interesting because this talk comes at a very timely moment. We just finished in the museum writing our Plan scientifique et culturel, which is a compulsory document in France for all the museums in France, and we never had one before. So we really had to think hard as a team what we were, who we wanted to be, what kind of museum, what our DNA was. And we realized that what made us special, of course, was our collection, which you will be a bit surprised. I won't go into that too much today for this specific reason. But what really set us apart is our structure. So the Musée de l'Art Antique is very special in the sense that we comprise of archaeological service with 5 archaeologists, 3 underwater ones, so we're the only museums that I know in France anyways with an underwater service, and 2 terrestrial archaeologists, and also we have a restoration service with 7 restorers, and that's not conservation, that's really restorers. They specialize on mosaics and also on paintings. And they do restorations for the museum, but also for museums for the Louvre in Tunisia. So it's really we are a museum with several scopes. Yet on the very local level, we're very open, and I think that's really what defines us at the Musée de l'Art Antique. But we weren't always like that. And I showed you the map, but. At the very beginning, in 1614, the city of Arles started to collect objects from the city in one point. And that was in 1789, in the Aliscan, you had the first open museum, one of the first open museums in France. And it's really interesting because it was in the Roman necropolis, one of the biggest Roman necropolis in France. And you can see they started to put the sarcophagi in a row like that. That wasn't at all the way they were found. That's just a reinterpretation of it. But what I find very interesting for us is that we at the museum, I don't think we did this purposely. I mean, I wasn't there when it was done. And when I asked the people who designed the museum, they didn't do it with that in mind, but they recreated the Allée des Sarcophages, and that was purposeful. But what they didn't do purposely, I think, was in the museum recreate the history of Arlesian archaeology. Basically, this is not how the sarcophagi would have been presented during Roman times that is actually a modern reconstruction, and we're sort of perpetuating that. And it's really interesting because visitors today still think that that's how it would have been shown, but it's not. And I think this is something in the museum that we need to think about, of how we present things and why we present things like that and how we display it to the public so they don't get the wrong idea, and understand that what we're doing is really just recreating the history of archaeology. That's pretty much what we're doing. We're not showing a Roman necropolis by this display. So the museum was built in 1995 to regroup in one single building all the wonderful artifacts found in the city of Arles. And it really took an archaeological turn in 2004, thanks to the DRASM. So the DRASM is it's attached to the Ministry of Culture. It focuses on underwater archaeology. And what they started to do was they started to do digs in the Rhone. And that was very novel at the time because obviously everyone knew that the Rhone was important, but no one really quite expected to find all that was found. So you might have heard of the so-called Caesar bust and all that, which really put the Musée de l'Art Antique on the forefront. But above that, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of objects and numerous shipwrecks that were found. And that motivated people at the museum to think that, well, since there's so many objects to be found, why not get one of the ships in the museum? So a massive enterprise, and I really won't go into that too much, was done in 2010. One of the ships was taken out, cut in 10 pieces, brought back up to the museum and displayed. So there you can see it was then treated for 2 years and now displayed in the museum. All that was done in 2 years. So taking it back up and building that wing. And what's interesting when we built that wing isn't just that we added a boat. It was really that we started to talk about archaeological context, which is something that wasn't done really before in the museum because for many objects we don't have archaeological context to start with. So we don't have the archaeological context to start with. For some objects we do, but there we had archaeological context for everything. And if you go to the museum today, you might find that a bit interesting, but the objects in the museum that before the boat, we mostly focus on style, on description, and there we focus on archaeological concepts. So that's something we need to change in the museum. I'm not saying we need to put everything with an archaeological context in mind, because we can't, but at least we need to explain why there's such a disparity, which is something we would like to do. And now, so after 10 years of not having been in the Rhone, we're going in the Rhone again. In fact, we started last year doing our first excavation. So there you can see these are our archaeologists. Very happy to be there. And I have to say they're very, very brave because diving in the Rhone is not a nice experience at any rate. So you have about 40 centimeters visibility. It's muddy. It's really not very nice. Anyways, they obviously love it because it's so rich in the things you find. So these are all the shipwrecks that we've identified. So this year we're going to focus on Arles 15, which is one of the small one right there. It's a small boat, and you might wonder whether we're planning to ship it out. But it's a question we're actually asking ourselves. We would have space, and it could be done. But I'm actually a bit wary about those things because now, after 10 years with the Chalon, with the first one I showed you, we now know how complicated they are to preserve. It's wood, it's very sensitive, and it requires a constant temperature, which is completely normal, and even then, it's very, very hard. So bringing another one back up would be also subjecting future generations to have to preserve that object. And it's a question I think we need to ask ourselves, and especially for us, the Musée de l'Art Antique, who actually do digs and who bring objects back up, to think about future generations and to think whether we really have to bring back objects. Obviously, if you're doing excavations when a building is built, and you need to do an excavation anyway, it's one thing, but it's true that for us, we need to think about the way what we do with objects and why we bring them back up. And especially, I don't know if I can, oh, sorry, that wasn't. This is, last year we did that little, it's called photogrammetry of the boat we're going to dig up this year. And we can see that already now with current technology that we didn't have 10 years ago, we can start to get a pretty good image and vision of these boats. So maybe the future of archaeology is, in fact, without objects in museum, which sounds completely crazy, but maybe we could show these shipwrecks in another way. Maybe we don't have to bring them all back up. Maybe there's technology can help us. This is still something we're discussing, and we haven't quite come to any conclusion yet. So I had this, and what we really tried to do along these experiences, to bring people with us. So we do a lot in communication to really show how it is, and because obviously we can't bring people in the room with us, right? It would be a suicide mission. But what we can do is really try to show them the back office and the real condition, and not the sort of imagined condition or romanticized conditions of what archaeology is. But this is what an excavation is in the Rhone. There's nothing really nice about it. And that's how they work. And so we do try to show this as much as possible, so that to avoid romanticizing the thing. And this is the boat that we're studying, and this is how they can see it. So it's not great. And photogrammetry actually does help us see it a lot better than the archaeologists can see it themselves. That's also very interesting in how technology can help us. And what we do, because what is very important to us when we do all that, is to bring people on board. So when we do these digs in the Rhone, every week, at the end of every week, we ask our archaeologists to meet people and to show them what they found, to talk with the local community about why they're doing what they're doing and how it's going on. And so and we do it on a boat, and it's obviously full. People are always very eager, and I have to say we're very, very lucky to have archaeologists that are happy to do this, because they do understand they work in a museum, and that as a result they need to bring that knowledge to the public. And the other project we're working on is the one called the House of the Arles. We don't just work in the Rhone. It's a site found in Trenquetaille in Arles. It started in 2013, and the excavation finished in 2016, and the project sort of was waiting to start again. We found frescoes from the Second Pompeian style, dating from around 70 to 50 BC. And it was very interesting for us for several reasons. For one thing, it's one of the paintings in the best state of conservation of that period found in France. But also it changed completely our chronology of the city of Arles, because that house came before the foundation of the colony. And that's something we didn't quite expect at all. But this was basically 800 boxes like that of frescoes that needed to be studied, analyzed, visualized. And of course, we have archaeologists in the museum, but we had no one specialized on frescoes. So we did that with the INRAP, and an archaeologist from the INRAP who is specialized on this problem came to help us to do this massive puzzle. And that lasted 2 years. We just finished a few months ago. So now the puzzle is finished. And it's really exciting for several reasons, because it is absolutely beautiful, and you can see just parts of it. But we do have a bit of a problem which is with the cinema red. It has the really bad tendency to darken at the contact of light. And so even to study it, we had to shut all the blinds, put special UV lights, and it was really, really a massive enterprise. You can see it here. They were basically working in the dark, which makes puzzle work quite difficult, I have to say, but they somehow managed, so... But so what we're working on, and this is our restoration workshop, they're working on trying to find a solution to preserve the pigment, the red pigment, so that it doesn't darken to the light, because if we do not find a solution, we cannot present them in the museum. This is obviously the condition to think about it. So we're working on two solutions. One of them is, of course, to work directly on the pigment itself. And another one is to think of how to present them in a way that we avoid putting light on them, so whether it's always in the dark and then occasionally a bit of light. But it's very complicated because we seem to be quite, I mean, that there are some frescoes in Pompeii with cinema, but somehow also their cinema doesn't darken as quickly as ours. So on one hand, we're very unlucky, and on the other hand, we're very lucky because we have a very interesting scientific question in our hands. But yes, we're even thinking of doing what we call facsimile if we can't present them so that the public could see it anyway. So this is also keeping us very, very busy. And what we try to do in the museum as much as we can, because we're sort of a living museum, we basically use all that we find and we then feed the museum with it. But we try to not just show the final thing, which is the object in the museum. We want to show the whole process. And that starts on the sites. So as you could see on the Rhône, on the site at the Verrerie, we also had people coming on the excavation site. And then we had people coming in also when the archaeologists were doing their puzzles, because and they were explaining that to them, and in the restoration service. So we really, really try to not just show archaeology, but to show how it's done. And for us, it's really important also, and that's something, it's a bit of maybe a wishful thinking, I guess, but it's important to make people understand, especially for us, since we have an archaeological service, that it's not about hunting for treasures. It's not about getting objects back up. This is not what archaeology is about. It's really about furthering our knowledge of Arles Antique. And that's what we try to do, but it's very complicated for an archaeology museum that is obviously also based on objects. So that's something we have to work on more and more. And all the events we do, especially with kids, as you can see, is always based on our research projects. We're very, very based on what we do, so that you can see kids doing the frescoes of the Maison de la Harpiste and adults doing fresco paintings. So that's really a focus on us, is whatever projects we're working on, we basically decline it to the people in every way we can. And we also do exhibitions linked to what we do. So last year we had Trésor du Fond des Mers, and the topic of that exhibition was really about trying to make the public realize what a treasure was. The treasure is not, as I was just saying, necessarily the discovery of object, golden coins. It's about the knowledge that an object can give you. And just last summer we had a completely different exhibition based on the frescoes this time. And we invited a young photographer from the École Nationale de la Photo, which is also in Arles, to work on our fresco and give it a completely different look. And then we had an exhibition in the Rencontre de la Photographie to sort of her work, to sort of showcase it and to get different people to look at it. Because what's really interesting in Arles is that most of you will know it for its Roman past, but it's an extremely rich cultural city. We have the Rencontre de la Photographie. We have several foundations, the Lume Foundation that just opened 2 years ago, the Liu Fan Foundation, the Van Gogh Foundation. It is extremely rich and mostly in contemporary art. So, and the geography in France for museum is quite, it has been booming lately, and especially in terms of Roman museum. In Nîmes, you had a Roman museum that opened a few years ago, and that's only 30 minutes away. In Narbovia, you also had a museum that opened, and that's a bit further away, but still there's a lot of Roman museums opening just around. And so what I find interesting for us is to show really what makes us different, and what makes us ultimately different is our collection, of course, but the structure of our museum, the fact that we are a living museum, the fact that we have we basically show what archaeology is about, and the fact that we have this ecosystem of contemporary art around us, which is not something that we need to see as a negative, but something we can use. If we manage to make links like we try to do with contemporary artists. So I'm not saying we're only working with contemporary artists, but it's definitely something interesting because we get publics that are into photography that all of a sudden might see archaeology differently. So I wanted to show you a bit all of what we did, and since Saturday is the Nights of the Museums, then we also, this is example of ours, always linked to, again, our research projects. We're really, really always focused on that. But we focus on the local to talk about the international because this is what we do. But by working on these projects, we talk about problems that we have in archaeology everywhere else, whether it's the conservation of objects, whether we should continue digging at all, and all this. So we are not just a museum of archaeology, we are a museum about archaeology. And I think that's really our own identity. Thank you. Gracias.